It was a crisp autumn afternoon when young Emma stood in the crowded hall, her small figure barely visible among the sea of adults. At just 8 years old, she was used to feeling out of place in situations like this. A room full of reporters, political figures, and spectators. This was not her usual world. But today was different. Today, she had been given the rare opportunity to meet someone who, for better or worse, had influenced the lives of so many in the country. Former President Donald Trump. The room was alive with excitement. Flashing cameras, hushed whispers, and the low hum of conversations filled the space. Emma, though, wasn't concerned about any of that. She had one question, one that had been quietly troubling her for months. It was a question that no one seemed to have an answer to, not even her parents. And it wasn't something that could easily be solved with a simple Google search. Standing beside her father, Emma nervously clutched a small notepad in her hands. Her wide, innocent eyes flickered over the crowd as she shifted from one foot to the other. She'd never been to an event like this before, and she wasn't sure if she even belonged here. But her father, who worked as a journalist, had insisted that it would be a great experience for her. He'd been right about that. So far, the excitement was overwhelming. But there was something else in Emma's heart, a quiet sense of urgency. As the crowd buzzed in anticipation, the former president stepped up to the podium. His familiar figure exuded confidence, his presence commanding the room. The flashes of cameras stilled for a moment as he began to speak. "I know that many of you have questions," he said, his voice deep and unmistakable. "And I'm happy to answer whatever you have." Emma's heart pounded in her chest. Her father gently nudged her forward, and suddenly she found herself walking towards the front of the room. She was uncertain, her legs feeling like jelly, but the weight of her question pushed her forward. Finally, she stood at the microphone. The crowd fell silent. Emma's voice, soft but clear, cut through the room. "Mr. Trump," she began, her voice quivering slightly, "I've been wondering something. Does God really care about us? Like, does he hear our prayers and know what we need?" A hushed murmur rippled through the crowd. Emma's question was simple, yet it carried the weight of so many unspoken worries. The room was still, all eyes on her, waiting for the answer. Donald Trump stood still for a moment, his expression shifting from the usual stoic demeanor to something more reflective. He paused, perhaps not expecting such a vulnerable question from a child. Emma felt the heat rise to her cheeks. Was she being silly? She had never expected such a deep question to come from a little girl, but she had asked it anyway. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Trump cleared his throat, his gaze softening as he looked down at Emma. "You know, Emma, that's a beautiful question, and I think the answer is yes. I believe God hears our prayers. He may not always answer in the way we expect, but he's always listening. Sometimes the things we pray for don't happen the way we want, but that doesn't mean God doesn't care. Maybe he's just preparing us for something even bigger. He's always there, even when we can't see him." Emma listened closely, her wide eyes never leaving his face. His words were simple, but they felt like a warm embrace, something she hadn't quite expected from someone like him. The crowd remained quiet, almost reverent. Then he added something that made her heart swell with emotion. "And remember, it's not just about asking for things. It's about being kind to others, too. God cares about how we treat each other. We're all in this together." Emma's throat tightened, and her eyes began to well up with tears. The way he had answered her, with such tenderness, had caught her by surprise. She had come here expecting a political response, a rehearsed answer, something that wouldn't quite touch her heart. But what he had given her was something entirely different. Hope. As she turned to walk back to her father, she could feel the tears welling up inside her. The room had gone quiet again, but her heart was full. For the first time in a long while, Emma felt like she understood something important. That the answers to the big questions in life didn't always have to come from textbooks or experts. Sometimes they came from the simplest places, in the softest of words. The days following the event were filled with a strange sense of calm. Emma had gone back to school, but her mind often wandered back to the meeting. She thought about the way Mr. Trump had answered her question with such compassion. For the first time in a long time, she felt that God was real, that he cared for her, and that he heard her prayers. At night, Emma would sit by her window, staring out at the stars. She had always wondered if anyone could truly understand the thoughts and dreams inside her heart. But now, after hearing those words, she felt a connection to something much larger than herself. She wasn't alone in the world. God was listening. Her father had noticed a change in her, too. He would often catch her in quiet moments, lost in thought. One evening, as they sat together at the kitchen table, he decided to ask her about it. "Emma, what's been on your mind lately?" "You seem different," he asked, his voice gentle. She paused, thinking about how to explain the feelings that had settled deep inside her. Finally, she spoke. "I think I understand something now, Dad. When I asked Mr. Trump about God, I wasn't just asking a question. I was asking for hope, and I think I found it. I really believe God hears us, even when we don't understand why things happen the way they do." Her father smiled softly, a look of pride in his eyes. "I think you're right, sweetie. Sometimes the answers come when we least expect them." Emma nodded, her gaze turning back to the stars. She didn't know exactly how to put it into words, but she knew that her question had sparked something in her. It wasn't just about God. It was about kindness, hope, and the shared humanity that connected everyone in the room that day. It was a reminder that in a world often filled with noise and division, simple acts of compassion could heal and inspire. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized that she wanted to be like that, to spread hope and kindness to others, to make sure that no one ever felt like they were alone in the world. As weeks passed, Emma's newfound sense of purpose began to take shape. She started with small acts of kindness, helping her classmates with their homework, comforting a friend who was feeling down, volunteering at the local shelter with her family. Each act, no matter how small, made her feel a little closer to the connection she had felt that day when Mr. Trump had spoken to her. One afternoon, while volunteering at the shelter, Emma met a young boy named Jacob. He was about her age, but his eyes carried a weight that Emma couldn't quite understand. When she asked him what was wrong, Jacob hesitated before speaking. "My family doesn't have enough money," he said quietly. "We don't have a home of our own, and I'm always scared we won't have enough food." Emma's heart ached for him. She knew what it felt like to feel alone and unsure. She reached out and gently took his hand. "Don't worry, Jacob. You're not alone," she said, her voice steady and sincere. "God is always with us, and we'll make sure you have everything you need." Jacob's eyes brightened, and for the first time in a long time, a smile spread across his face. Emma realized that even in small moments, she could make a difference. As Emma continued to share her message of kindness and compassion, she began to see the ripple effect it had on those around her. Her classmates, teachers, and even strangers started to take notice. It was as if Emma's quiet act of asking a question had sparked a movement, one that wasn't about politics or power, but about human connection and the goodness that lay within all of us. Months later, Emma sat in the same room where she had first asked her question to Mr. Trump. This time, the audience was different. It was a group of children from different walks of life, each of them struggling with their own fears and uncertainties. Emma had been invited back to share her story, to tell them about the day when she had asked a question that had changed her life. As she spoke, her voice steady and confident, she realized something profound. It wasn't the answers that mattered most. It was a willingness to ask, to seek, and to share. The act of vulnerability, of reaching out to others in a moment of need, was what truly brought people together. When she finished, the room was silent. Then, one by one, the children stood up and shared their own thoughts, their own fears, their own hopes. It was as if the room had transformed into a place of healing and connection. Emma knew that it wasn't about politics, or who had said what. It was about the universal truth that kindness, compassion, and the belief in something greater than ourselves could bring people together. As she left the room, Emma felt a warmth in her heart. She had asked a simple question, but it had led her to something far greater, a life filled with love, hope, and the realization that each small act of kindness could change the world. Epilogue, the legacy of compassion. Years later, Emma would look back on that moment, and she would know that her question had sparked something beautiful, not just in her, but in countless others. The world had become a little kinder, a little more connected, because of one little girl's brave question and compassionate response that followed. Certainly. Let's continue with Part 5 and follow the story's emotional arc to an uplifting and inspiring conclusion. As Emma entered her teenage years, she continued to carry the lessons she had learned from that pivotal moment with her. Her one small act of kindness had grown into something much larger. By the time she was in high school, Emma had become a source of inspiration for her peers and teachers alike. She started a community outreach program at her school, designed to help local families who were struggling, and she worked tirelessly to organize events that brought together people from different backgrounds. What had started as a simple question had turned into a movement, one that rippled outward and created real, tangible change. And though Emma had long since left the event where she first asked Mr. Trump about God, his response remained etched in her heart, still influencing every decision she made. One day, as she was volunteering at a soup kitchen with a group of her classmates, a familiar face walked through the door. It was Jacob, the boy she had met years ago at the shelter. He was older now, but his eyes still held the same warmth Emma remembered. He spotted her immediately, and his face broke into a smile. "Emma, I've been looking for you," he said, his voice full of gratitude. Emma, who was in the middle of serving food to a group of families, stopped and turned. "Jacob, what are you doing here?" "I've been helping out at another shelter downtown, but I wanted to find you," Jacob said, his voice full of emotion. "I wanted to tell you something. You changed my life that day at the shelter. Your words, they stayed with me. You were the first person to ever tell me I wasn't alone. You made me believe in myself again. And now, I'm doing everything I can to help others, just like you helped me." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes. She hadn't expected this. The idea that one small interaction, one simple moment, could have such a lasting impact on someone's life left her speechless. In that moment, Emma realized the power of a kind word, the power of belief. It wasn't just about answering a question or providing solutions. It was about showing others that they mattered. "I'm so proud of you, Jacob," Emma whispered, her voice trembling. "You're doing amazing things." Jacob smiled, looking down for a moment before meeting her gaze. "No, Emma, you were the one who gave me the strength to keep going. And I'm not the only one you've helped. Look at everything you built here." Emma turned to see a group of people from the community who were helping set up the meal. People from all walks of life, working side by side. Some were strangers, others were longtime friends. They all shared the same mission, to make the world a kinder place. As she looked around at the people who had come together because of her efforts, Emma felt a warmth spread through her. What had begun as a small question had turned into something far greater than she had ever imagined. It wasn't just about asking Mr. Trump a question or waiting for an answer from a politician. It was about the impact of everyday people working together, showing love, empathy, and kindness to one another. "Thank you for reminding me, Jacob," Emma said softly, her heart full. "You've reminded me that this journey is about all of us, the people we help and the people who help us." As Emma entered adulthood, she began to pursue a career in social work and community development, determined to create systems of support for those in need. She knew that the work would be challenging, but it felt like the only path she could walk after all the lessons life had given her. She often thought back to the day she met Mr. Trump and how his words had planted the seed of hope in her heart. But more than that, she thought of the people, like Jacob, whose lives had been transformed by acts of kindness and belief. In her new role, Emma found herself working with individuals and families who faced the hardest of circumstances. She saw people who had lost hope, people who didn't believe in themselves, people who were struggling in ways that were unimaginable. But Emma knew that sometimes all it took was a reminder, a kind word, a listening ear, a gesture of understanding, to help someone realize they weren't alone. One day, Emma was called to speak at a major community conference. The event was filled with leaders, policymakers, and influencers. It was a powerful room, full of people who had the ability to make sweeping changes in the world. As she stood at the podium, looking out over the audience, Emma realized that the message she carried was one that could change everything. "I was once a little girl, asking a question," Emma began, her voice calm yet full of conviction. I asked about God. I asked if he heard our prayers, if he cared for us. The answer I received wasn't a political one. It wasn't about power or policy. It was a simple answer, and it changed my life. It was about kindness. It was about compassion. It was about treating people with the love they deserve. She paused for a moment, letting the weight of her words settle into the room. Every day, we have a choice to make. We can focus on what divides us, or we can focus on what brings us together. We can choose to listen to each other, to believe in one another, and to help those who are struggling. That's what will make a difference. Not policies, not politics, but people working together, supporting each other. The room was silent as Emma spoke, the power of her message resonating with each person in the audience. She could feel it, the collective shift in energy. In that moment, she knew that the path she had chosen, the life she had built, was exactly where she needed to be. Years later, Emma became a widely respected advocate for community-driven change. She had expanded her outreach programs into multiple states, helping people in rural areas, urban centers, and everywhere in between. Her message of compassion, kindness, and shared responsibility had touched countless lives. Emma's story, that simple question she had asked all those years ago, had become a beacon of hope for people across the country. On one special occasion, Emma was invited to speak at a major gathering of world leaders. As she took the stage, she looked out at the faces of people who had the power to change nations. But it wasn't their titles or their positions that mattered to her. What mattered was their shared humanity, the collective power of kindness and empathy that could transcend borders. We live in a world that is constantly changing, Emma said to the global leaders gathered before her. But one thing remains true. The most powerful tool we have is each other. We don't need to look to the powerful or the famous to change the world. We need to look to each other. We need to listen. We need to care. And we need to act together. After the speech, many of the leaders came up to Emma, each one moved by her words. In that moment, Emma realized that the power of a single question, asked with sincerity and hope, could indeed ripple out across the world. Her journey, from a little girl asking about God to a woman inspiring change on a global scale, had come full circle. Emma knew that no matter how far she went, she would never forget that one moment in time when a simple question had changed everything. Many years later, Emma stood at a small park, watching the sunset with her daughter, Ava. The same innocence she had once held now rested in her child's curious eyes. Ava turned to her mother, her voice soft and tentative. "Mom," Ava asked, "do you think God hears our prayers?" Emma smiled warmly, her heart full as she thought of the many years of answers that had come before her. She kneeled down beside her daughter and gently cupped her face. "I do, sweetheart," Emma replied, her voice full of love and wisdom. "God hears us, and he answers in ways that are beyond what we can see. But more than anything, he asks us to care for each other. He asks us to love. And if we do that, he'll be with us in every step we take." Ava smiled, her eyes bright with understanding. "I think I want to help people too, just like you, Mom," Ava said, squeezing her mother's hand. Emma's heart swelled with pride as she hugged her daughter. She knew, in that moment, that the message she had carried all her life, the message of kindness, love, and compassion, would continue to grow. It would continue to touch lives, build communities, and inspire future generations. And just like that, the ripple effect would go on.